Walter, long time no see.
Yes, for sure. Chaim. Hi, Chaim. How are you?
Oh, Shem Walter, how are you?
Good. I don't know where you came up. I don't remember him ever telling me.
I don't know, everything whenever I got any pledge,
No, those are Schwartz.
Oh, the regular.
Yeah,
There's a big crowd here on the Zoom. There's someone, I think someone's on the door.
Those are.
No, that's Schwartz.
We have 5 here. We're getting there.
No, the other ones are better. They're like ladders. I think they give, no.
You have 6, really.
Why, Susie?
Yeah, but if she heard you say that, you'll be in trouble, buddy.
Mordechai holds the Rashid of the Mordechai.
Stop it, Ernie.
Thank you.
204 or 205.
205, yeah.
205. It's a complex sugya that we're going to learn tonight. And we're going to eventually get to Heiche Kedusha, the controversial, like shortened Shmona Esrei. And we'll see really what the halacha is about that. And how what our minig is regarding that. So when you're davening in a minyan, one should make sure to recite the Silent Amida at the same time as the rest of the tzibur. By the way, this week, it was really halach l'maisa because we had a couple, we've been looking around to make sure that there's at least 6 people starting Shemona Esrei together. We learned last week, l'chatchila, you want 10. According to the Igros Moshe and Rav Mishnah Berurah and the Chai Adam. We had the Dayan Weiss, the Minchas Yitzchak, who also said l'chatchila, but b'di'evid, if you had 6, it's okay. That's how we came up last week. Mm-hmm. And we had a few times this week where, and also the nafkamina that by Chazar Sashatz, that if you at least you have 6, you can start. We'll see that's not also, we'll have later on shots. We'll see what the dinim for sure is regarding that, how that is developed. But we quoted a Rambam last week that seemed to suggest that by the shots, if you had 6, you could start. So what the Tzurba is doing is you should come timely so that everyone could be at Shemona Esrei at the same time. So you have 10 people. So you should not arrive late for davening to make sure you can be in the Shemona Esrei together with everyone else. Some people come late, and the rest of the congregation not only is in the middle of the Shemona Esrei by the time he's ready to start. We have to use all the other halachas we learned earlier in Tzurba, where if you come late, you go just say Baruch Shamar, Ashrei, Yishtabach, and shorten. But let's say, anyways, you come and the people have already started Shemona Esrei. Should you start Shemona Esrei? So the Gemara in Brachas addresses this question and states that one may begin a silent Amida if he will be able to complete it by the Chazan reaches either Modim or Kedusha in Chazar Sashatz. So obviously, it's more lenient if you hold Moedim, because that gives you more time, but you have to make a calculation. If I start Shemona Esrei now, will I be able to finish before a Chazan starts his repetition and gets to Kedusha? That's the cheshbon the Gemara has you making. Ravuna, let's talk about a guy who came late. The tzibur already started. So Ravuna Shita is more lenient, that if a person makes an internal calculation and he thinks he can finish his own Shemona Esrei, and by that time, so what's coming out? Coming out that Rav Huna seems to be holding that the Iker part that you need to be there for is when the Shliach Tzibur says Moedim. So as long as you're there and you can do Moedim with the Tzibur, you fulfilled Shliach, you've been Tzvila b'Tzibur. Rishon ben Levi Omar, Im Yochel Haskell v'Limot Shlo Yagir Shliach Tzibur Kedusha Yispalav Im Lava Yispalav. He says no. You got it. If you don't say Kedusha with the Tzibur, you're going to lack tefillah b'tzibur. So you should not start. You have to wait until kedusha is recited. So you sit around at, like, say, Tzur Yisrael. You can't say Baruch Atah Hashem Gar Yisrael because then you can't be mafsik. So you have to stop at, Micha Mocha, right? With those places where you're allowed to be mafsik for kedusha and say kedusha, and then start your silent Shemona Esrei. Meaning, if you made the calculation, and let's say you think most of the people are like at Sim Shalom already, and you don't think you're going to finish your silent Shemona Esrei by the time that the Chazat, the Shad says kedusha, you should not start your silent Shemona Esrei. You should wait, say kedusha with the tzibur, and then say your silent Shemona Esrei. And in other words, one must make sure that his silent Amida does not cause him to miss reciting the portions of the Chazaras Hashatz that the congregation recites together, which Lechora takes precedence as Kedima. Concerning one who began Shemona Esrei together with the tzibur, some people daven a long Shemona Esrei, but knows that he will not complete it in time for Kedusha. The Bir Halacha is the Chafetz Chaim. That means the Mishnah Berurah, when he wants to sometimes go into depth on a certain inyan. So in 109.1, the Bir Halacha, that's the Chafetz Chaim says, if it's uncertain whether we may begin due to the same issues as this comes above. So perhaps if you know you're going to daven a long Shemona Esrei, and your Shemona Esrei, it's going to take you until after the Shad says Kedusha, also that those people should not start their Shemona Esrei. However, the Aruch HaShulchan and others rule that he may begin nonetheless, as he begins at the same time as the Tzibur, and at that time is obligated mitzvah of Tefillah B'Tzibur, like we learned last week, that there is an element of Tefillah B'Tzibur if you start together with the Tzibur. And of course, if you're at Kedusha and you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei, we're going to learn later on what you do, but you're silent, and you just listen to the Kedusha. The Beis Yosef, in his commentary on the Tur, writes that the halacha is with Rav Yeshua ben Levi, and the calculation is not moedim like Rav Huna, but rather you have to calculate that you got to be finished before the Shatz gets to Kedusha. In the case that one will not be able to finish before Kedusha, when should one recite the Amidah? The Rambam writes that he should wait and begin his Salat Amidah at the same time as the Chazaras Hashatz, and then say Kedusha with the Chazan. We're talking about you're at the Tzur Yisrael, right? I don't have enough time to finish. So you should start saying your Esrei along with the Rambam says, along with the Chazan. No, you're gonna do the Kedusha with the shots. And thereafter you continue. That's what the Rambam is gonna say. Anichnas, we'll see. It's gonna be a while before we get to the final halacha. Anichnas lebeis hakneses. Umotz tzibur shemispalim belachash. Right? He's come late. They're almost finished Shemona Esrei. Im yachol laska v'ligmar shlei yagish le'tzibur l'kedusha, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi yispalel. Wait, you should start davening now word for word with the Shliach Tzibur as he starts repeating it. You respond like the Am. You don't say Kodesh, Kodesh, you respond, or whatever you respond. And then, like Abe was saying, you continue your own tefillah with the by yourself.
Seems like nobody follows the opinion of Rachman. It's only tradition.
Beis Yosef and Rambam seem to follow Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It seems from the Rambam that at least with respect to responding to Kedusha, one who recites the Amidah word for word with the Chazan is considered to be part of the Tzibur as well. This is also the position of other Rishonim, including Tosfos and the Rosh. It's interesting to note, I'm reading a footnote, that according to Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Alicha Shlomo, one who begins the silent Amidah together with the Chazan can also be considered one of the 9 others necessary to respond for Chazor Sashatz. So we're going to see that there's going to be a certain amount, even though we learned last week, L'chor, you should have 6. We're going to see that the halacha is different. The final halacha, as we practice it in shots, you need more people. You need at least 9 to respond. And when you do that calculation, the guy who's davening with the shots, you can have 8 plus him. And then you fulfill the 9. The Shulchan Aruch accepts the above approach of the Rabbah and rules that one who begins Shemona Esrei with the Chazan may recite Kedusha along with them. Nevertheless, the Ramah writes that this form of reciting Shemona Esrei is not recommended ideally. One who did not begin with the rest of the congregation should preferably wait until after Kedusha and only then begin his silent Amidah. Let's think in our minds, we're going to see a same machlokas regarding Heicha Kedusha, right? If we're ever at a wedding, when we're davening a mincha ketzara, and we want to have a short Shemona Esrei, you don't do it in a shul. We'll see. A shul, the halacha is we never do it. But if there's no shul, we'll see, and there's no definitive shots established, because it's out somewhere like at a hotel or something like that, we'll see that those will be in the heterim maybe to do Heicha Kedusha, if there are any heterim.
I've
So-
actually seen it done in Shul, and Jared said it. When what happened is there was a hesped that went very, very long, and we were going to miss Zman.
Okay, so if we're going to miss Zman, so that's one of the reasons given is we're going to miss the Zman, even in the shul. But one of the leniencies also is based, you're not in a shul.
Right.
You're not in a shul. And you see some people starting the minhag of Ashkenazim, what we do, we follow this Ramah. And we're going to see it's going to be stated. We don't start our davening. The shot starts. He says Kedusha, we answer. And then we take our 3 steps back and start our Shemona Esrei. That's the Shita of the Ramah, not like the Ramban and like the Shulchan Aruch. The Sfardim will see, do it differently than us. Okay. And that's the Ramah. One would ideally wait until after Kedusha and only then begin his Silent Amidah. The suggestion of Shulchan Aruch only applies where for some reason he cannot wait that long to begin. I don't know. I'm not sure we can describe the situation, but l'chora, that's when the Ramah would agree. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Imaskilis palim shots. Kishiyagim shots l'nagdishcha, right? That's Sfardim. Yomer imo mila b'mila kol ha'kedusha k'moshu oimer. You should say every word with the shots. Yomer imo mila b'mila birchas hakel hakodesh ubirchas shomei tefillah. So that means you got to control your Shemona Esrei so that when he gets to Shomei Tefillah, you're there with him. You can't just speed ahead of him. That's a chiddush for us, right? It's not just Kedusha. The Shulchan Aruch says you should say Shomei Tefillah with him.
You're actually saying it with.
No, I guess the rest of it you don't, but you want to make sure.
You're saying word.
Yeah.
When you start
Yeah.
late, you started.
Yeah, that's
You're not responding to
the Shulchan Aruch says you say Mila b'Mila. We'll see what the Ramah says.
The Rambam says different. The Rambam says you respond with rest.
Respond with the rest of the Tzibur. Shulchan Aruch says
And then you go on your own.
Mila b'Mila.
It's different.
And the Shulchan Aruch wants you to say along with the shots by Shomei Tefillah, the gam yichavin k'shigir shots lemoidim, yagia hu lemoidim ol ha'toiv shim chol chanel odos, k'dei sheyishem hashatz b'moidim. This concept, remember Rav Huna mentioned moidim. So these 2 aspects, Kedusha and moidim, he's going to be with the shots. Says the Ramah. L'chatchila lo yaschil ad achar shama Kedusha v'akel hakodesh. Ramah says none of that. I don't agree with any of this. You should wait silently at Tzur Yisrael, but you haven't started your davening yet. Wait, let the shot say his Kedusha. You respond like you normally do for Kedusha. Let him finish Akel HaKadosh. He's going to continue Atachoinin. You're going to start your silent Amidah at that point. Elashim, Hutzrach la'aschel mikoich shasha overes k'dei lisbal gulut tefillah dina hachi. The Rambam says if there's a time constraint and you can't wait, maybe the time of tefillah is going to leave, then you can do it the way the Shulchan Aruch suggests. Say it again.
Why wouldn't you be answered?
No, why? Because now you're going to finish. So Yisrael, you go to Akel HaKadosh, and then you start with the shots.
Yeah, but meanwhile, you have to Yisrael.
you're up to Tzur Yisrael. No, then you're
Now
gonna,
you're gonna
before
do
you
the
start your Shemona Esrei, you gotta finish to Akel HaKadosh. And then you start your Shemona, you're silent immediately, like, the Ramah is saying, he doesn't hold that you should do it word for word with the shots. Let the shots, you stay at Tzur Yisrael. He's gonna get to Kedusha. You can recite Kedusha when you're at Tzur Yisrael. You're not at Goal Yisrael. That's what I meant by Tzur Yisrael. Don't stop Baruch Atah Hashem Goal Yisrael, because you can't be mafsik then. Stop at a place where you can be mafsik. And then recite the Kedusha. He's going to say Akel HaKodesh. Then you now do Tzur Yisrael, Goal Yisrael, and start your Shemona Esrei. There's no hefsek anywhere there. Now, but you see, this thing is a machlokas Sfardim and Ashkenazim. Mishnah Berurah clarifies that one reciting the Amida with the Chazan should specifically care to complete the bracha after Kedusha and the bracha after Moedim together with the Chazan. It means when you're holding like the Shulchan Aruch and you go along with him, you should try to say Akel HaKodesh with the Chazan and the Moedim with the Chazan. Mila b'mila, Perish Yomer Imo Nikadesh, and Ledor Vador, Ad Akel HaKodesh, and then Vachakach Yispal B'ftas. But then, Bernie, you can daven by yourself. Try to finish up before the shots gets to Shemet Tefillah, and then sort of have to wait for him and then conclude with Shemet Tefillah. Then in those unusual cases, B'tainis Tzibur Lo Yomer Mashatz Anenu Bracha B'fnei Atzma V'afilu B'mincha Ela B'Shemet Tefillah Ki Yachid. So we know that on a Tanis Tzibur, the shot says Anenu as a separate bracha, and how and he finishes Baruch Atah Hashem Ha'oneh Beit Sarah. We as Yechidim don't do that. We put the Anenu in the Shemet Tefillah. So the Mishnah Berurah is warning us that on those days, and if you're doing this, you should not recite along with the Chazan the Anenu as a separate bracha, but you put the Anenu in your own Shemet Tefillah bracha. And you should say the Birchas HaKel HaKodesh with the Chazan. Perish Yechavim b'shtei brachos elu l'sayim mashatz b'yachad. V'az ein tzarich su lanias el ha'amenim k'mo shatz b'atzmo. You don't have to say amen. And just like the Chazan himself, you don't have to say amen. I guess it's important by Akel HaKodesh and Moedim to say amen. And you don't have to do it because you're saying it along with the Chazan. Now, the Yalkut Yosef follows the Shulchan Aruch, does not mention the Ramah's ruling at all. The Yalkut Yosef rules that when reciting a Heicha Kedusha, a shortened tefillah, the tzibur should begin reciting the sound Shemona Esrei at the same time as the Chazan. Presumably, the Yalkut Yosef would say in the case above as well, that one who came late should begin together with the Chazan, even l'chatchila. See also Yalkut Yosef when the Shulchan Aruch is cited without the Ramah, seemingly supporting the assumption that one should begin the sound Shemona Esrei with the Chazan. Says the Yalkut Yosef, Kishazman mitzumtzam, the time is tight, where you might miss the zman. This is when we're doing a Heicha Kedusha, and the shots is saying, the only one saying, Nachon shekol hakal yispal tefillah mida mila b'mila im hashliach tzibur, not like we do, where most of us are silent while the shliach tzibur is davening and gets to Kedusha, and we recite Kedusha, and he does Akel HaKodesh, and then we take our 3 steps back and start Shemona Esrei. He's saying, for the Sfardim, it's not like that. They say word for word with the shots. The way the Yalkut Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch is telling us, no one is saying amen to anything. All reciting it together. Someone needs to, maybe Alan, you have to mute your thing, or somebody mute.
I don't have any noise here.
Okay.
No,
Look at the
Well, it's quiet now,
Yeah,
so
it's all
they
quiet
must
now.
have,
They
they
don't
must
have
have
to
took care of it.
But that's the way Svardim daven in general. They daven the entire davening together, B'kol Ram, right? They go, Sukkot Zimra, yeah, they go.
Yeah, but not Shemona Esrei.
No, in
They're-
Shemona Esrei, so they're already used to doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Aval pi sheba'ofen kazeh ein af echad shoyna amin acher birchas hashliach tzibur ein bekach klum she'ein anias amin ma'keves b'zeh klal. Answering amen is not required for a bracha. For example, you make a bracha b'ori pra eitz. Nobody's answering amen to your bracha. It doesn't cause any problem that nobody answered amen to your bracha when you're by yourself. He's pointing out that anias amen is not required. This is the Ramah, right? Ashkenazim he's commenting on. Okay, so you see a very clear machlokes. To summarize, it seems that the guidelines for one who begins the Shemona Esrei later than the Tzibur are as follows. If he concludes a silent Amida before the Chazan reaches the Kedusha and the Chazaras Hashatz, he should begin right away while the Tzibur is still reciting the Amida. If he calculates that he cannot conclude so quickly, there's machlokes between the Ramah, who says you should wait until after Kedusha and then start, and the Shulchan Aruch who says you should start with the Chazan. Although Ashkenazim usually follow the Ramah, in this case, some poskim rule that even Ashkenazim may follow the approach of the Shulchan Aruch. See also Mishnah Berurah, who cites a number of achronim that support following the Shulchan Aruch, even for those who usually follow the Ramah. Moreover, the Piskei Teshuvos rules that one may lechatchila begin the Amida with the Chazan in accordance with this opinion and in combination with the approach of the Chassam Sofer, which we're going to learn now. So, if there's a specific need to begin sooner, then even the Ramah agrees to begin with the Chazan. Like perhaps there's a time everyone's gonna miss the time unless you start with the Chazan. So even the Ramah would agree. Now, the Chassam Sofer appears to disagree with the entire understanding developed above. In his opinion, reciting the silent Amida together with the Chazan is actually the ideal fulfillment of the notion of Tefillah B'tzibur. Umasha Sha'al, im yesh lomer kedusha im ashliach tzibur, kishayachid mispalel imo, zeu ikar tefillah b'tzibur, says the Chassam Sofer. This is the way to do it. Ki ma sheyachidim kol echad mispal b'fnei atzmo is mikri tefillas yachid. When we do our silent Shemona Esreis ourselves, it's our own, it's a personal tefillas yachid. Now that's not exactly what we learned last week, when we said there is a cheftz of tefillah b'tzibur when all 10 people in the shul start davening together. It's different than with the shots, but L'chor Chassam Sofer is saying it's 10 yichidim davening. Rak mashe echad moitzi rabim zeh mikra b'tzibur. When one person is yotze for everybody, that's called tzibur. V'rak b'nei she'i efshar yishichav nekulam l'shich tzibur tiknu shispal kol echad be'atzmo. So he says that Chazal were masakin that we do our own silent Shemona Esrei is because it was going to be hard for everyone to be mechavin carefully with the shliach tzibur. It's appropriate that people would have said word for word with him. Slisan and Sukkah, Gabi Hallel, She'oimer v'oina achrav, Mashu Oimer k'mo Anu Hashem, and we say Anu Hashem. Ela kedei sheyastir shat tfilaso, tiknu b'lachash tchila, k'mavur b'sof Rosh Hashanah. How about this? The Chassam Sofer is saying the whole point of all the individuals saying tefillah b'yachid is to allow the shliach tzibur the opportunity to prepare for the davening of the shliach tzibur.
On behalf of the entire team.
Correct.
Yes.
Remember, he's also going to be doing, but l'chora, the Chassam Sofer seems to be learning that it's to allow him to kavanas and preparing and all that. According to the Chassam Sofer, it seems that the entire reason for the institution of the silent Amida, that the tzibur recites at the same time, is simply to allow for the chazan to prepare for his chazar sashatz. But if one did not start the Amida together with the tzibur, like somebody's late, he's at Sur Yisrael, right? Then he should certainly begin together with the chazan's repetition, not wait until after kedusha, like the Shulchan Aruch, right? Not like the Rambam. However, the Rav Moshe questions this chiddush of the Chassam Sofer. The Yoser Tamua, it's wondrous or it's questionable.
Astounding is that it?
Yeah, I don't know where they came up with that. Tamua is more like it's a surprise, right? Masha b'sefer Likutei Shut Chassam Sofer, shenitfas mechadash b'simin gimel. There was a reprint in Rav Moshe's time, probably in the 50s or 60s. Itagam came the Masha Yochid Nispala Mashatz Zeikr Tefillah B'Tzurba Ayin Sham. He says that when a Yochid davens along with the Shliach Tzibur, that's Mamish Tefillah B'Tzibur. Sharei Kol Dvarim Elu, says Rav Moshe, all these things who l'chura divrei tos. Only Rav Moshe could say that on the Chassam Sofer. Sha'kol takana haisa k'dei lahoitzi es she'ena b'kiyim. Why do we have a shliach tzibur? Because there's people who don't know how to read Hebrew. U'shekulam b'kiyim hukshel Rabbi Seder Rishonim al mash shechoiz rasha. It's just the opposite. There are a lot of Rishonim that questioned when everybody was a baki, what do you need a shliach tzibur for? The imrak tfilas hashliach tzibur lahoitzi hayat tfilas tzibur. Hare hayalehem l'taket b'shvil ze atzmo la'olam dehu tam sheka b'chol eis v'iden v'im dorim b'rim shul shaykh lach l'kal zeh. What does he mean? If only the chazan's recitation to fulfill the obligation is considered communal prayer, then they should have instituted for this reason permanently. Since this reason applies in all times, so these are clear words that can be disputed. Meaning, what Rav Moshe is saying is, we should have had these two stages. There should have been the Shliach Tzibur starts, and we daven with him. What is this thing that we daven and then he davens? If it's correct, what the Chassam Sofer is saying, the takana should have been the Shliach Tzibur starts, and we start with him, Mila b'Mila, if that was the preferential way. Gam ein sheich lo she'ikar tefillah hu ma shashatz choizer tefillah utfilas halachash af shemispalin kal gadol b'vasachas hu rak tfilas yochid. He says, you have 1,000 people in shul, and all of them are saying a silent Shemona Esrei. You can't characterize that as a tfilas yochid. Shenimtzal dvorv shekol hakal shein yotzin klal b'shel hashatz. You have this whole kahal. They're not being yotzit by the shatz because they said it themselves. V'yotzu b'tfilosim b'lachash. You're going to tell me, lo yotzu they tfilos b'tzibur? The vade achas sheyotzu they chovas tfilosim, after they fulfill their own obligation for tefillah, ein shmiyosam hashatz shuv mitzvahs tefillah. It's not this. You already were makayim your mitzvahs tefillah by saying your Shemona Esrei. Now you're going to listen from the shots. It's l'chor maybe a different mitzvah. It's not mitzvahs for the nimshet she'ikor mitzvahs tefillah b'tzibur, and perhaps the 1,000 people davening by themselves. That's the ikar mitzvahs tefillah b'tzibur. Shalom mistaber klal sheme'achshash shema lo yichavnu kulam l'shliach tzibur ya'akud din tefillah tzibur makal. That because of the fact that people would have been able to listen carefully to Shliach Tzibur, they would have removed the concept of Tefillah Tzibur from the congregation. So Rav Moshe speaks strongly to the Chassam Sofer. Now,
last week in the Rambam,
huh?
the Rambam says the kids that eat was a tzibur, so he says that there's an insane belief that the repetition is of the Shliach Tzibur. That's
We can't hear the question.
Jake is saying the Rambam said that when the Shliach Tzibur starts reciting and people responding Mila b'Mila, he said that's the Tefillah b'Tzibur. So he's wondering why Rav Moshe seems to be negating the effect of the shots, because when we're B'kiyim, l'chor we were already motzi our Tefillah when we davened ourselves. So what's the function of he was pretty much, though, trying to negate what the Chassam Sofer said, that the ikr is when the shots davens. So let's see how Rav Vosner responds to Rav Moshe. Right? Rav Moshe passed away in the early 1980s. Huh?
86.
Yeah, 86. Rav Vosner passed away just a few years ago, lived in Bnei Brak. Remember, Rav Vosner was a Chassidish, the posek for the Chassidish community. And he and it's very interesting. Chassam Sofer lived in Pressburg. He was an Oberlander, right? They spoke German there. We wouldn't characterize Chassam Sofer as a chassid by any stretch of the imagination, would you? We wouldn't consider Chassam Sofer. However,
I think he was born in Hungary.
he was in his mother was in Frankfurt. I think he may have been born in Frankfurt am Main. And because I when I was in Frankfurt, there's a kever of Imo Shel Chassam Sofer. But the Yetiv Lev, right? The first Satmar, they followed very much the Chassam Sofer. So you see, there's a very strong connection between the Chassidic world and the Chassam Sofer, partly because of that connection there, that the Hungarian Chassidic Rabbanim very much followed the Chassam Sofer. So the Vosner sort of takes up the defense of the Chassam Sofer in a long tshuva. For Isi Lagoin Rav Moshe Feinstein, B'shut Igris Moshe, Chelik Gimel, Shehevi Divrei Chassam Sofer Anal, V'kosav Aleim Shehem Divrei Tos. Then he says, U'chilas Kvod Teroso Lochenu. He says, with all due respect, he says, I don't agree. It's not so. It's not a tos. When individuals gather and they are doing their own avoda, it's called avoda b'tzibur. Uvenidin shalanu tfilas tzibur, and you can call it a tfilas tzibur. V'hu al derech shas yom nun aleph. The noises v'noisenes hagemor betam Pesach the nikra korban tzibur. So when we bring the korban Pesach, every individual is required to bring a korban Pesach. Now, you could bring it in subscription, right? 10 people or more could subscribe to one korban, but it was certainly a korban brought by Balabatim, right? It wasn't like the korban Ola, which is brought in the Beis HaMikdash as a korban tzibur. It's bought by the Trumas Alishka, by the funds that were donated. A Pesach is brought by individual funds. However, the Gemara calls a korban Pesach a korban tzibur. So there's a whole discussion in the Gemara there. Why is it called a korban tzibur? V'ka Omar, and there the discussion brings out mishum de'asi b'knufya. It's brought as a group. There's a large group bringing it. So Rav Vosner is bringing that when individual people came to the Beis HaMikdash and offered their korban Pesach as Yechidim, it was still called tzibur, a tzibur avoida. Hare, the Ika Beis Gidrei avoidas tzibur. Two gedorim, zwei dinim in avoidas tzibur. Hainu, echad, korban avur kol tzibur. Sometimes korbanos are brought for the whole tzibur. For example, one korban ola is brought to the morning for every member of Klal Yisrael. And beis, mashmiskatzin lasos avoidasam b'tzibur. Sometimes Klal Yisrael gathers to do their avoda as a group. Says Vavozner kamo kein linyan tefillah. So too by David. Elo, shachsam sofer ka'omar. The dargas tefillah tzibur ha'amiti, the true level of tefillah b'tzibur, the true one, haya yoter im haya zel yedei shliach tzibur v'chol hamoinim ito. Like when we say Hallel, and he says, Hoy Hashem ki tov lo l'chazdo, we respond. That's sort of a paradigmatic paradigm, like it's the paradigm for a tefillah b'tzibur. And therefore, if we would have been silent, not said if we would have said our Shemona Esrei word for word along with the Shliach Tzibur, that would be more amiti tefillah tzibur. Upshita me'od, the Masha Kosav Chassam Sofer B'l Shoinoi. It's clear from what he wrote, the Masha Yechidim Mispal B'fnei Atzmo Nikra Tfilas Yachid, that when the Yechidim the individuals daven their own Shemona Esrei, it's called Tfilas Yachid. Ein Ritzono Tfilas Yachid Mamish. He's not really defining it as a Yachid. El Leumas Maila Tfila Imashatz. Comparing it to when we daven with the shots, it's in a sense like a Tfilas Yachid. Toyar Tfilas Yachid, K'moshe Korban Pesach Kolech Levadu Korban Yachid. Just like when everyone brings their own Korban Pesach, it's a Korban Yachid. Velonikra Korban Sibur. Aval Pichen Yeshlo Milas Atziba Yidei Shabbat B'Knufya. It's called a Korban Sibur in a sense because it's brought publicly. And where do we see a very important proof that the Korban Pesach is considered a Korban Sibur? Because we have a concept, Tuma Hutra B'Tzibur. If the majority of Klal Yisrael were Tameh, you'd be allowed to bring the Korban Pesach. It's only because it's a Korban Sibur. Because a Korban Sibur, like a Korban Ola, Korban Musaf, if the coins were Tameh, they'd still be able to bring it. Because Korban Sibur, because Tum is Hutra B'Tzibur. And the same did applies to Korban Pesach. So the Rishonim, we're talking about the Anshe Knesset Gdolah, the people who established all these dinim early on. That we start off davening Shemona Esrei by ourselves. Technically, yes, Rav Moshe was right. We have fulfilled our tefillah requirement. The additional level of the repetition of the chazan does not add the elevated level of communal prayer, since they've already fulfilled their obligation for communal prayer by davening together. The early Rishonim, we're going to learn these Rishonim when we come to because there's going to be a section, a few pages from now, called Tfilas Hashatz. There we're going to go through these Rishonim. Why do we need a Shatz? We've already davened. What is he adding? Hashta im ira she'echad icher. So Rav Wosner says, but if it so happens that someone was late, the Lutzrach Lispalim Hashatz, the Chazar Hashatz, ki yov l'achsam sofer malas tefillah b'tzibur. L'achsam sofer wants to give that yachid a mile of tefillah b'tzibur. Dahainu darga rishoyna shel tzibur. It's like 1A and 1B, and this is 1A. Upashet says that kavanas l'achsam sofer. Everything that the Chassam Sofer said is with Moli wisdom. V'alkein, aminig b'mogen Avram, simin chol chavdalad, lispala mincha, miyad b'kol ram, imat tzibur, mispala mi'ito mila b'mila. This is like a hecha kedusha, if they do a shortened Shemona Esrei by mincha, and everyone davens with him word for word. Nihi demafsidim b'tzad echad, right? They don't say their own silent one, but they say it with the shots. Which fulfills sort of the primary way of doing Tfilas Tzibur, the way that Chassam Sofer learned.
So can I interrupt you just a second?
Of course.
This whole the thoughts that the Shevet HaLevi is discussing is what I was thinking about. What is more important in terms of having kavanah for, not for the Shliach Tzibur, but for the individual davening quietly to himself and saying all the way, where do you have greater kavanah? While you're doing a silent amida, or when you're listening to Shliach Tzibur? Why
can't you have kavanah both?
So that's what I'm asking. What's the point of the Shliach Tzibur if you're having kavanah already when you're doing the amida on your own? Because the question is, when you're saying the words, you're concentrating on saying the right words, and one after the other, you go from one bracha to the next. Whereas when the Shliach Tzibur is reciting it, you have more time to contemplate and think of, you have a particular issue that you might have that you want to think about. When the Shliach Tzibur says that, you have time, you can distract yourself and think about those issues.
We're going to learn that there is a very important maila of the Shliach Tzibur's davening. It creates a new cheptz of tefillah that we can't maybe reach a certain thing by our tefillas yochid. I would say, Bernie, you would have kavanah at both places. That's why it's so important. People stand with their feet together until the end of Shmon Esrei, in the Nefesh Harav, in the Pnei Harav. The Hershel Schachter describes Rav Soloveitchik davening with his feet together and not taking the 3 steps back until the Chazan takes his 3 steps back. And having all the various kavanas that you had during your own silent, having the same kavanas during. I think you're absolutely correct.
So you think it's additive, is what you're saying?
It's
in terms of your
additive.
kavanas.
It's additive. And you need to have kavanah in both. And because the Tefillah B'Tzibur is going to create something else that perhaps we don't have during our Yachid, during our Tefillah B'Yachid. Yes, Rabbi.
Moshe does not need me to defend him. But I think if you look at the words of the Sam Sofer, he's very clear. He doesn't, I don't think he says what Rav Rodden said.
Rav Rodden is reading into him.
He's definitely, because if you read it, it couldn't be clear. Ki Masha HaYechidim Kol Echad Mispal B'Fnei Atzma Mikler Tefillas B'Yachid.
So he reconciled him by saying, Yaakov Yellen is saying that the Pashut, if you read the Chassam Sofer, he says very clearly that it's considered a korban Tefillas Yachid. And Rav Vosner is sort of reading a lot into the Chassam Sofer. Okay, but that I think it's very interesting to learn these major achronim, Rav Moshe and Rav Vosner, having this dispute among Talmidei Chachamim, right?
I wonder if Rav Vosner wrote this when Rav Moshe was still alive or not, because I would have loved to know if there was any response from Rav Moshe to that. But, okay.
We'll have to. I'm sure we can find out. The Shevet HaLevi was writing at that time. He was writing for a long time.
When was this written? Because it'd be interesting to know. Of course, if Rav David was around, he could have told me, but unfortunately, he's not.
Okay. So, according to the Shevet HaLevi's understanding of the Chassam Sofer, there are 2 types of communal service, and both the silent Shemona Esrei with a minyan, like we talked at the opening today, that if you make sure that there's at least 10 people to start your silent Shemona Esrei together, and the Chazar Hashatz are considered to be Tefillah B'Tzibur. The first is the type where individuals perform their own service at the same time, like bringing the Korban Pesach, everyone as an individual, but it's still considered a Korban Sibur. And the second is the time where one person performs the service for everyone, like the Kohen Gadol doing the service on Yom Kippur for Gans Klal Yisrael, or the daily Kohen who shechted the Oilas HaTamid on behalf of all of Knesset Yisrael. He's one person who's doing the avodah for everybody. It's every member in Klal Yisrael got whatever he needed when they shechted that one animal. It is preferable to recite the Shemona Esrei in the manner instituted by Chazal, the first method, for the reasons mentioned by the Chassam Sofer. We're talking about individual, says this Shemona Esrei, and then you listen to them. But if a person arrives late and can longer do so, then according to Chassam Sofer, he can fulfill Tefillah B'Tzibur by reciting the Shemona Esrei simultaneously with the Chazan, which is the second method of Tefillah B'Tzibur. The Yalkut Yosef also rules that one who recites the Shemona Esrei together with the Chazan is considered as having fulfilled Tefillah B'Tzibur. Yachid HaMispal Tefillah Shemona Esrei B'Lachash Im Chazoras HaShliach Tzibur Nechsheves Tfilosa Ketfilas B'Tzibur She'ikah Tefillah B'Tzibur He Al Tfilas Shemona Esrei. The Sefer Tefillah Kal Chasa summarizes some of the practical details of one who recites the Salat Amida together with the Chazan.
It seems that he has to say the whole Shemona Esrei.
Yeah, and we said, remember, when you want to time it with Shomei Tefillah, you want to time it with Moedim.
But each bracha you have to.
No, we read before that you could speed up, but when you get to Shomei Tefillah, you should hang back and complete that with the Chazan, complete Moedim with the Chazan, and then you can finish L'chora. Let's see what he says. The Tefillah Kil
Well,
Chazan.
if you look at footnote 23, there appears to be a machlokes among the Rishonim as to whether the Korban Pesach is.
So let's read it. In truth, there may be different approaches in the Rishonim as whether the Korban Pesach is entirely a Korban Yachid, a Korban Sibur, or a combination of the two. He says Psochim, Rashi, and Sfasemis there, which may indicate that it's a Korban Yachid, and in Psochim 39a and Rashi there, which may indicate it's a Korban Sibur. And Rambam, Perush HaMishnayos, Introductory Sefer Kodshim, which may indicate it's a type of a hybrid of the two. And he quotes the Yosef Kalinsky In Hagdoras Korban Pesach, is it a Korban Tzibur, Korban Yochid? And we can see there are certain dinim, like the concept of Tumah Tzurba Tzibur, in some ways the Korban Pesach is considered like both. Let's see how the Tefillah Kilchasa summarizes some of this. B'tefillah mashatz, yesh lizar b'kamer inyon. Toiv shashatz yomer tomid kol nusach kedusha b'kol ram. Sharitzrech l'shomer lo omer yachad ito. So the shots should always recite the whole text of the kedusha out loud, meaning kadosh kadosh, right? Sometimes chazonim they'll say lumos bracha. No, he has to say everything so that the guy who's saying along with him would be able to recite it. Number two, when you're answering to kedusha, yagbiya afa mispalul es raglav mimkoiman la'achar siyum kedusha yomer psichas abrocha shlishis benusach shomer hashatz. That means when you elevate your feet during kodesh kodesh kodesh, you should do the same thing, and you should say l'dor vador, not the ata kodesh. Then yesh li stapik imam espala mashatz yomer ito gam barchenu bivracha. That means when he says the birchas kohanim, Elokeinu v'Elokeinu barchenu b'vracham shleshas batoira, he says yesh li stapik. He's not sure. Hashayach the birchas kohanim afilu mispalal ito mila b'mila v'yesh shekosav shirashayla amr. There are people who write that you can say it with him. And b'tanis tzibar afilu b'mincha oimer anenu b'shemet tefillah kechol yachid, like we said before. Okay. Now, let's see if we can learn this sugya of Heicha Kedusha, which is this summary, the shortened repetition. A related issue to the discussion previous section concerning reciting the silent Shemona Esrei at the same time as the Chazan involves the practice of a shortened mincha, or sometimes known as Heicha Kedusha. In this case, the Chazan begins with a shortened repetition of the Amidah, which continues to the end of Hakel HaKodesh, following which the congregation continues to say the Amidah silently. In this case as well, the question arises whether the rest of the congregation should recite the first three brachos of the Amidah silently together with the Chazan, similar to what we discussed before in the previous section, or do we wait until to begin after Kedusha? Before we can answer that question, we must first analyze this whole practice itself of employing this shortened mincha. What's the basis for it, and when is it appropriate to use? It's found in the Kolbo, in his discussion of the halachas of mincha. The Kolbo is a Rishon. He put out machzorim and sidurim, and so it's a very early source of some of our practices. It says, "U'mitzpalim Shmona Esrei ala seder belachash." First, we say Shmona Esrei quietly. So right away, he says that the reason of the Shliach Tzibur is there are people who don't know how to read properly, so he has to be motzi them. Come on, betfilah shachris b'kol ram. The tzibur shlo yispalu vein shos b'yom nispalat tzibur b'lachash. Let's say the congregation is gathered, and the time of mincha, it's almost time where we can't have mincha anymore. Shkia, right? Usually, the time of mincha ends by shkia. You want to daven before. And let's say they don't think there's enough time before Shkia that they're going to be able to finish. So the decision, like Yaakov told us, it was a Valley Tour, they had a hesped and it was very late. So they didn't think that everyone could say their silent Shmona Esrei and have the shots repeated and finish in time. By the way, we're going to learn later on, let's say Shkia is 6 o'clock. Can you start, is enough to start at 5:59, even though you're going to end up going way past Shkia? Or do you have to calculate that you have to finish your mincha completely before Shkia? So that's going to come up. The tzibur shlo yispalo vein shos b'yom yispalo at tzibur v'lachash. V'leu shlichot tzibur l'fnei haTeva. Aval b'isha asur lavo lidei kach. Well, you should prohibit. It's not something that it should have happened. V'lachi yoytz nat tzibur dei chavosam b'tfilah shliach tzibur. You fulfill your tefillah b'tzibur with the chazan. V'zeu choyvosam. Tzrichan hatzibur lamod achrav b'shashu yored mirosh hatefillah v'atzoyf hakodem shemispal la'atzmo. Ve'ein mafsikin, ve'ein mashlichin, means you have to daven with him. You shouldn't speak. You answer kedusha. V'achar kach noifim al pneim. I guess, and then you finish Shmon Esrei. V'omer tachnun, v'achar kach kaddish shalim. The Kolbo describes a scenario where the latest time for saying mincha is approaching, and the congregation will not be able to complete it in time. In this case, the chazan should begin reciting the Amida out loud, and the congregation recites the silent Amida with the chazan word for word. It seems from the Kolbo that in such a scenario, the chazan recites the entire repetition aloud, and not like we do, where by Hakel HaKodesh he's now silent, and we all continue silently. It looks like by the Kolbo, the chazan did everything like repeating a Shmon Esrei, and we repeated every word with him silently, which is similar to the practice discussed in the previous section. Although the Kolbo only allows this practice when pressed for time, the Beis Yosef writes that in his time, it was the common practice in many communities. The Beis Yosef, commentary on the Torah, Rav Karo, Achav Noyeg B'Rova Makomos, he says Rova Makomos, L'Yispal Chadchil Shliach Tzibur Tfilas HaMincha B'Kol Ram, K'dei Sheyanu Kedusha Achrav, L'Yitzarech Lazar L'Yispal B'Kol Ram, to save the time. It seems from the Beis Yosef that it's permitted even l'chadchila to recite the chazan's repetition at the same time as the Santa Mida. The Darkei Moshe, the Ramah, right? The Ramah wrote a sefer, the Darkei Moshe, where a lot of the details of how the Ramah came up with his dinim are broad. Comments that one should always recite the Santa Mida before the repetition of the chazan, except in extenuating circumstances, which is the clear position of the Kolbo. Aval anu einoi hagin came. Right? The Ramah speaking for Ashkenazim say, we don't follow this. We and the Shliach Tzibur should daven in a silent Shmon Esrei. Except where there is a need that mincha is going to be missed. So then he starts aloud. So we could say Kedusha, I guess, in its right time. V'keinu b'ma'aril. Right, the Mariel is the German in Ashkenaz that the Ashkenazim follow. He says one person shouldn't daven along, so at least there's one person to say Amen. Shulchan Aruch omits any mention of the possibility of beginning the Amida with the Chazan reciting it aloud, despite his appearing to sanction the custom of the Beis Yosef. I mean, he and the Beis Yosef are the same person. So he's so his only dispensation is that if the designated chazan arrives late, he may skip his silent Amida if necessary, and begin with this repetition when the congregation has completed Silent Amida. But the Ramah records the custom of the tzibur skipping the Silent Amida as a practical option in extenuating circumstances. Shots. Let's say there was, he's the chazan. I guess these were shuls that had a chazan. Maybe he's a chiyuv. He has to have the amud, right? And he came late. People already davened their silent Shmon Esrei. V'utzarach lamod lifnei hateva la'alter. Your lifnei hateva is probably kol ram tzibur. Ve'in tzarach lachzor is probably lachash. He can start right away, says the Shulchan Aruch. However, the Ramah says v'chein im shas atchak. The Ramah says, if the whole tzibur is in an emergency because they're free of time, this is the source of Heiche Kedusha. Mr. Burr confirms that the short Amida may only be utilized in cases of need. Can't be done l'chatchila. Mr. Burr reminds us that the Iker Takana, all of us should say a Shemona Esrei silently first, and then a Shliach Tzibur B'Kol Ram. And it's only B'Shas Atchak, if it's an emergency, that we should do it. Now, I'm going to cut short because it's almost time. I want to leave time for questions, and there's a lot to finish here. And we'll see how we get to our minig of waiting until after Kedusha, and that will come next week. Okay. By the way, many people got their volume 12s